Professor Ellen Townsend. It's a great pleasure to have her here today. She got her undergrad at the University of Leeds and then went to Nottingham to do her PhD. After a short stint at the University of Oxford in the Suicide Research Centre in the Department of Psychiatry, she returned to Leeds in early 2000s and has been there ever since, leading a highly successful self-harm research group, which looks into self-harm research from both a basic science and a practical implementation perspective. And she holds a variety of honorary posts around the university there, and has also recently been on a big bid to look at self-harm in the digital space that she will be talking about to us today. So it's a great honor for her to come here for our first hybrid session. So thank you so much.
And thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's very exciting to have people in the room and people online. I think this is the new way, isn't it? So it's actually my first in-person seminar since the pandemic hit. So it's an absolute joy to be here. So I am going to talk to you about this particular program of research that I'm co-leading with Chris Hollis, who sadly couldn't be here today. And it's all about understanding risk and harnessing resilience with young people in the digital world. So hopefully something of interest to people in the room and online. So what I'm going to try to do today is to very briefly talk about the challenge that we're facing in regard to this issue, which is, has been fairly controversial, I think it's fair to say. I'll talk a little bit about the programme, which you'll see is pretty large. So it's going to be probably a bit of an unsatisfying toe dip into what we're doing. So I guess my invitation would be to say, invite some more people from the programme to talk about their specific pieces of work in depth. Because I'm kind of across quite a few of the work packages. I'm going to talk about two in a bit of detail today, in terms of case studies, if you like, to give you a bit more of a flavour of what we're doing. So I'm going to talk about an app that we're developing, co-creating with young people to design a new assessment tool for self-harm in a variety of settings. And then I'm going to talk about Perboard, the socially assisted robot, which is work with Dr. Petter Slovak at King's in London. So the first part of this is let's kind of get ourselves centered in what we're thinking about today, which is the problem, in quotes, of how we're dealing with the online world and perhaps what we might do to fix them. So I guess we can distill what we're faced with in this sentiment here, a challenge that we've got in human culture. Maybe this is a big claim, and I'm not the first person to have made it, that since the Industrial Revolution, we've had this enormous increase in our capacity online. It presents opportunities and risks. And the programme is designed to look at both of those things. To see what we can do about harnessing the power of this environment for healthy development, mental health and well-being, whilst at the same time realising that there might be some harms and some risks for particular people in this space. And this is in the backdrop of what we're calling and what many people are talking about in terms of a rising tide of mental health issues. And Tamsin has been a leader in this space, showing us through NHS digital research, for example, that we've got to the stage now where about 1 in 6 young people in a classroom, 1 in 6 young people have a possible diagnosable mental health disorder. So that's sort of 5 to 6 young people in a classroom, which is a large number actually. And there seems to have been a deterioration since 2017, both in younger adolescents and even more so perhaps in older adolescents. And a threefold increase in self-harm rates, and they're quite hard to get an absolute handle on. So these are our kind of best guesses, really, with all the caveats around how we do epidemiological research, what we can catch and what we can't catch in that space. Of course, there is a literature and a substantial literature. We're not starting from nothing. I mean, Dr. Orban has been doing really important pioneering work in this area, as has Candice Odgers, who's on our scientific advisory panel for the programme, and Chris Hollis, who's my co-lead. So we have these signals that, you know, some things may not be problematic, and they may be problematic for specific groups who might be vulnerable in some ways, and we need to do a lot more to understand that. And I'm taking an example here from my particular field, which is self-harm research. And there was a really important paper led by Anne John a few years ago. They did a systematic review of the extant literature at the time, and the title was The Good, the Bad and the Unknown, and I think we're still there. We know that some things are very bad for some young people, and they may tip them into a space that's very, very, very difficult and leads to crisis. And obviously there's the case of Molly Russell, which, you know, has been all over the media. On the other hand, there are these affordances. So we have this research showing from the University of Birmingham that young people might be feel more able to disclose very difficult emotions that they're having around suicidality, for example. So it could be a really helpful space. So our job is to kind of tread that line between what's helpful, what's harmful, and for whom and when. So in essence, that's what we're trying to do, given all that we already know. So how are we trying to do this? This is the work I'm talking about today, is funding which is cross UKRI. So they put 24 million into 7 programs, which are all looking at slightly different aspects of adolescence, mental health and developing mind. There are lots of collaborations that could emerge from those different programs. They're all very different in their approaches and what they're doing. And I think ours is probably the one that's most diverse in the things that we're trying to achieve in a sort of fairly short space of time. So we have a really amazing team that we managed to establish with an engagement award. So this is a little award, 100K, just to get things going and really establish a working relationship between all these different, very impressive and collegiate colleagues. And I'm really enjoying, and it's fantastic to be co-leading this program with Chris Hollis. And I think this is a really good model of leading, big funding like this. We have 2 young people as co-Is on the grant who represent our advisory group called Sprouting Minds, and they are absolutely incredible. And they are, they come to meetings with us, and they're real leaders in this space. So overall, I think I worked out yesterday, we've got about 50 people working on the programme. We've got RAs and postdocs. We've got an early career research group who are bringing across the work packages so that there's cross-fertilisation, and hopefully hosting webinars that we might be approaching people here to come and have a little chat with the wider group as well. So it's quite a big audience if you'd be willing to consider coming and talking about your research with us. We've done things like set up an authorship group, because when you've got a programme like this, everyone needs to be very clear about who's going to be on papers, how do we establish protocols and things like that. So Edmund Snuga-Bark is heading up that for us. We've got a comms group, and then we have our Sprouting Minds young person advisory group. Just to say something about them quickly, they have been involved and are involved at every stage of the research process, which means a significant chunk of funding that we ask for in this space to make sure that what we're doing with them is safe, meaningful, and that they develop their careers in this space as well with us. And we have 2 dedicated members of staff supporting them. So Dr. Emma Nielsen, who is actually a trailblazing early career researcher in my field, very passionate about public engagement. So she's taken on leadership of this for us, supported by Elvira Perez Bajillos, who's a senior member on the team. And this is just a photograph of them leading a workshop at our kind of 6 monthly, we call them huddles, getting together to talk about where where we're at with various issues. And they are pretty terrifying, actually, at times, and amazing for that. They feel supported by Emma and the team to be able to tell us what we need to hear, and they are embedded in different ways. So not every work package that I'm going to mention today is working with them in the same way, but they're working across all of the work packages equitably, and I think that's really important. We have our advisory board, and you'll recognise that Tamsin very kindly has lent her time to help us with some of the big questions that we're wrestling with, to give us really helpful feedback, because we're talking about some quite tricky issues. So we're trying to understand the mechanisms of adolescent mental health risk, resilience, and support in the digital world, so that we can design and develop these interventions and more appealing for young people. The internet was not designed with young people's mental health in mind, and neither are apps. So this is something that's kind of cart after the horse, but this is where we are. So the program looks like this. I hope that's coming out okay on the screen. We have 2 themes which are interlinked by cross-cutting themes. So we've got digital risk and resilience, and then we've got this space for personalised digital interventions, and they talk to each other. We have a work package solely dedicated, work package 1, which is led by Cathy Creswell at Oxford, to make sure that we are talking to each other. And there are deliberate pathways between some of these themes. So, for example, we have Millennium Cohort Study and people looking at the ABCD data in the States, which will directly feed in to the development of some of the tools, as well as the co-creation with young people. So there's cross-talk. And the program is morphing and developing as we move along. And we're already seeing really important links between 2 of the work packages that are thinking about developing new tools. So the socially assisted robot and our card sort task for self-harm. We're already seeing links there that we might actually bring these 2 things together in the future when we have more of an evidence base for each of them for young people who are at risk of self-harm. I'm not going to go into massive amounts of detail, but we do have some cross-cutting themes. One is around individual differences, essentially. One's around emotional regulation, impulsivity, both really important for self-harm in particular, but across sort of transdiagnostic issues in mental health. And then we've got this important theme about responsible research innovation led by Marina Dorotko at Oxford, so that when we're developing these tools and environments, we're doing it in a way that is safe, acceptable, sustainable, and so on. So that brings me on to the case studies I'm going to talk about. First of all, I'd like to step into the mind of Petr Slovak, if I can, because Petr is leading on this work, where we're trying to support in situ emotion regulation in young people who are at risk of self-harm. And Jess Williams is a postdoc working on this, and Marina Dorotko, with her research, responsible research innovation hat on, is working with us on this. So I haven't got time to go into the huge amounts of background on all of these things, so that's why I really would like to make sure we've got time for questions so people can pick up things that they're really interested in. But where we're going from with this is that we know that young people who self-harm struggle with emotion regulation. So swirling negative affects, or vortex of really difficult cognitions and emotions really comes through in the literature in lots of different ways using different methodologies. So what Petr has been doing over the last several years is mainly working with younger children, although in the last 3 years has moved to working with adolescents using socially assisted robots. And I was going to bring one today, but I just couldn't fit one in my bag. But they are very cute, sort of little teddy-like creatures who, when you turn them on, have a heartbeat. And the idea is that the child learns to calm purple and at the same time is down regulating their own sort of emotional state. and purple purrs when they're calm. So in the last few years, as I was saying, we've done research with young people and a study recently at Oxford University with students. It does seem that purple on small sort of feasibility studies helps young people to do this, to downregulate those emotions and bring self-compassion actually to moments of heightened emotion, and facilitates the practice of cognitive strategies that might be useful and acts as emotional companions. So, you know, purple can be taken around and carried places to situations that might be emotionally charged and difficult. So within this work package, what we're trying to achieve is an exploratory study, because we're now wanting to look specifically at young people who are at risk of self-harm. How do we need to adapt this for their needs particularly? Is it harmful, helpful, all of the things that I've already kind of alluded to in the introduction, so that we do this in a really kind of sensitive way. So that's what's going on now. We'll move to an open trial and then possibly a micro RCT, but that might change to a fully blown RCT depending on what we find and what the needs are. So in the exploratory study, we're getting a bunch of young people to have a go with purple, to take some daily measurements of how they're feeling on things like emotion regulation, on self-harm ideation, depression, anxiety, and then they do an interview to see how they got on with purple. And then after that, we do, this is the beauty of doing interdisciplinary research, we do the co-design work after this process. So this is how Petra and I have these conversations, where he's got his HEI hat on and I've got my psychology hat on, and we have a bit of a kind of argument about the best way forward and kind of get there. So data collection has happened. We recruited 24 LGBTQ plus young people as one of our at-risk populations that we're interested in. They're mostly white, and they were all experiencing thoughts of self-harm, or had actually acted on those thoughts. We had high rates of retention in this study. I mean, it's only 3 weeks, but, you know, pretty good, 84% by 3 weeks. Quite astonishingly high levels of thoughts, both of self-harm and suicide in this group, which is not, unfortunately, surprising. That's what we would probably expect from the literature. And PHQ-9 scores and DERS scores and GAD scores, which possibly are moving in a direction that don't look particularly good, to be frank. A flavour of quant, because this is small numbers and it's feasibility. This is the quant data that I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about, because it's a flavour, it's small numbers, but things seem to be moving in the right direction over a 3-week period, particularly for anxiety and emotion regulation. And this is what we're seeing across a pattern of studies now. I mean, it looks like we also have a signal for reduction in self-harm ideation and behaviour, which I think could be really powerful. I'm still trying to get my head around that, but I want to show you some of the qualitative things around that, because I think that's also really interesting. So something that is possibly very exciting is this idea, this is probably quite small on the screen, sorry, but highlighted in red is this idea that quite a lot of these young people are telling us that they're not reaching the point of even self-harm ideation with purple. So they're actually managing to use purple in a positive way when distress levels are rising. So even before getting to the point of thoughts of ideation. So that's possibly really, really powerful. And I don't think it's something that we've really seen in the literature before. So we're kind of excited about it, but it needs a lot of kind of unpacking. So there does seem to be something new and specific, perhaps to this population. So remember, we've gone for a high-risk group, and we need to look across different areas, perhaps, around stopping the cycle of self-harm and not reaching that point of ideation. And there was something else in the qualitative work, which was around breaking the self-harm mindset, if you like. That this has become your go-to strategy for coping, and this has come out in some qualitative research that we've done previously as well with young people in different settings. So Flavours of really exciting data coming out of this small pilot study, which we're reflecting on and thinking about how we might take that forward into testing in some kind of feasibility trial now, and then hopefully progressing onto some kind of RCT. But the next stage in this approach is to think about the resources that might go around Purple. So not just Purple on his or her or their own, but with a set of resources that might support what's happening. We don't, we're doing ESM and Purple. What's the mechanisms? What's actually happening here? So all of those things might be contributing to those positive changes that we're seeing. So we've got work to unpack all of that. Okay, so the next case study I want to talk about is at a more early stages than the work with Purple. And this is the work that we're doing on a digital card sorting task to understand and assess self-harm. And I've got two amazing research fellows working on this with me, Joe Luckwas and Camilla Babbage. Chris Greenhall is computer science and is fantastic with the kind of tech, understanding what the platform and capabilities side of things might look like, which is why interdisciplinary work in this space is so important, because I don't know about that stuff. I know about psychology. And Marina, again, for the RRI component. And I've got Petter creeping in the background again, because actually there does seem to be this overlap between how we might use Purple and CATS together. So those conversations are already happening quite organically. Now, we have a subgroup of Sprouting Minds working with us on this, and Camilla and Joe have done a really amazing job of doing that work with them. And I want to tell you about it because I think it's really important, because most app development is not done in this way. And I have seen many examples of apps that are already out there with millions of downloads, for example, and no pilot data even published, for example. So we're trying to do this in a really responsible way. I'm not going to say too much about the background. I'm going to hope that, given the audience, we've got an issue with self-harm, how we assess it, and interventions. There's a real dearth of interventions actually for young people, given the size of the problem that we're facing with self-harm in young people. We think that there might be a role for digital innovation in this space. I'm here today because basically young people brought me here through earlier PPI work, having created the self-harm tool that we've got here as a research tool. In PPI work with young people, they wanted to see it used in the digital space. That's where they wanted to drive it. So again, we're in this really difficult space where we're trying to do something in a space which might be harmful for the people we want to connect with. And that's a really big issue and something that we're wrestling with as a whole program. So how do we do this really, really safely? So we are evolving existing research. So we do have several papers and studies where we've tested this card sort task, which explores the build-up to self-harming young people. So we have a bank of cards, thoughts, feelings, events and behaviours. It was co-developed with young people and clinicians and academics. It's informed by the literature and key theoretical models. And it allows young people to tell the story of their self-harm non-verbally, which actually for a lot of young people in this space is really helpful, and over time, because we wanted to understand the complexity of self-harm and to see how it changes over time. So that's where we came from the research background. So this is the prehistoric version on a tabletop, which I'm quite fond of actually, because you can take it around the world quite easily in a little kind of plastic pocket. But young people show us what was important to them over time in terms of the thoughts, feelings, events and behaviour that led to self-harm. We also allowed young people to use blank cards. So if there's something missing from their personal sort, even though we tried to be comprehensive in the things that we thought might be important from our interrogation of the literature, talking to experts, talking to young people, they could just simply write it down and add it in. And here's an example. So the timeline goes across here, and the young person puts the cards in order of what was important to them and when, I self-harmed, and afterwards. There are a number of ways that you can analyse those data. I'm not going to go into it now, but feel free to ask questions. As they were doing it, young people would say things like, oh, I hadn't realised that that was an issue for me. And, oh, that's interesting, that seems to really relate it to that. So there's some sort of mentalisation going on, them understanding their own thoughts and feelings in relation to behaviour. It's a bit like DBT chain analysis, but it's not quite, because it's more tied to a specific timeline. So that's our starting point for innovation. And further conversations with young people and with clinicians do lead us to the conclusion that this could be a really useful assessment tool. In having those collaborative conversations that can capture complexity, allow people, young people in particular, to raise very difficult topics. So in self-harm, we deal with things which are very, very distressing. And anecdotally, when we have collected data in qualitative interviews alongside the card sort task, young people disclose much more information in the card sort task than they do in the interviews, because they can put the card down, they can acknowledge that that's an issue for them. Maybe they're not ready to talk about it now, which is fair enough, but now we know that that's something that we need to factor into when we're thinking about what might be helpful for that young person. So our overarching aim with this project is to co-develop and test a prototype digital CATS tool to support assessment and pinpoint intervention targets for young people who self-harm. We are wrestling with multiple kind of issues at the moment, not least how you create an app. We have people on the team that can help us do that, where we should start with this research. So there are many different settings that this might be the place to go with. How can we ensure that this is useful, feasible, acceptable in a variety of different settings? So that's the work that we need to do. And we're embedding PPI all the way. And I said I wanted to just show you how Joe and Camilla are going about this, because I think it's just really cutting edge, and the young people seem to be really getting on board and enjoying it. So we want to make it useful. We want a product that young people want to use, right? And we want a product that clinicians want to use. There might be some tensions there, but we've got to find a way to make this work. So Camilla and Joe have been really strategic in how they've set up the PPI work. Safety is a massive issue when you're dealing with topics like this. So they've been really careful about thinking, especially when you're doing it on the online space that we've had to do in the last few years. So how can we, tell that you're distressed if you're talking about stuff in a meeting, and what supports do you need? What happens if a young person does get distressed? What we plan to do with them and how they can contribute. Managing expectations. They might want things in the app that we can't deliver on, and how do we negotiate that? We need to find ways to do this. So we're having monthly meetings. They're on Zoom. Camilla and Joe make them really fun, and they use all kinds of incredible techniques like Jamboard to explore things. And at the moment, we are moving to the phase where we want to co-create the app. So we're going to work with groups of young people to sit down and problem solve what the app looks like, what it feels like, how you do the sorting. Does it need to be on a mobile phone? Does it need to be on a desktop? All of that kind of stuff. So all of those things that I've already said. So these are all really important issues. And I want to just think about context for a moment, because where we start doing this probably has implications for the rest of the development of the project. it's an assessment, but we have a hunch that it may also be therapeutic. And there are many reasons to suspect that from the literature. So any kind of assessment in a general hospital with a liaison psychiatry team, for example, is known to lead to reduced self-harm, so regardless of the quality. So if we could do a really good one, and we have some work that Dennis Uran has done on enhanced assessment, that looks to be really helpful in terms of retaining young people in treatment, so making sure that they adhere to the treatment. So we might have something that's also therapeutic. So we need to think about our outcome variables really carefully. So moving on from that context, where should we start with this once we've got the tool? So that you've got this sort of dual thing that's going on of creating the tool, but making sure it's suitable for the space we want to start with. And we think possibly in schools, possibly as a part of a training toolkit that practitioners might use in the school space. But schools think self-harm is risky, and rightly so, and can be aversive. So how can we make sure that we can make this is a tool that's sustainable once implemented and has that kind of responsible research innovation at its core? So I'm pretty sure, given the work that I've done on systematic reviews and with clinicians and frontline practitioners, that trying to do an RCT where you're recruiting young people and allocating them to a wait list is just not going to fly, or treatment as usual. So I think we'd be looking at an active control. What would that be? I'm actually in favour of an active control because it's a more stringent test of the new intervention. We'll get smaller effect sizes, but it's probably more realistic. And then we need to think out what is it doing? I mean, what are the mechanisms that are at play here? If this is a helpful tool, is it mentalisation? Possibly, but it might be other things as well. So lots of things to grapple with. So at a programme level, we've got some big challenges also. It's a really fantastic problem to have that we don't, even though we've budgeted for it really well in the bid, our young people want to get involved in everything. So we're doing Evidence Week in Parliament next week. Chris is going to go along and sort of talk about what we're doing. And one of our young people is going, which is fantastic. But the fact that they want to get involved in evidence means that we probably don't have enough money to support everything they want to do, which is a great problem to have. But I think we're actually going to need to find some more money for it, which is great. It's a programme and it's diverse, and we try to mitigate the problems with that by having a work package that brings everything together, and having people like Kathy Creswell and Peter Fonagy involved with that is obviously incredible and helpful, but we really need to make sure that that's happening. And a question to everyone is the old, how do we make sure any kind of policy or practice influence that we might have sticks? How do we make this sticky? I think is really important. So I'm going to stop there. And we have a website which is coming very soon. If you have any questions that don't get answered today or asked today, do feel free to drop me a line and I'll stop there.
Great.